Thank you, everyone, again for jumping in with us today for this conversation on emerging trends in fleet procurement. I just want to say that this session is brought to us by Circle K. Circle K Pro is a fuel card solution for fleets of all sizes that makes everyday management easy and reduces overall transportation costs. It's easy, reliable, and efficient. Circle K Pro's fuel cards help you save on every gallon. So shout out, thank you, Circle K, for your help in supporting this content today. We're going to dig into this presentation next. And before we do, I just have a couple housekeeping notes. As you've seen, we have the chat open and we have a Q&A tool here in Zoom. As we're going through the session today, feel free to drop your questions into the chat, into the Q&A, and we will either get to them mid-conversation if they're pertinent, or I might hold them until our Q&A at the very end, and we'll just kind of let it all flow. And also just a heads up as we're going, we are using a tool called Slido, which allows us to have live polling. So you may see a QR code or a link pop up in your presentation, which will prompt you to, click on that QR code or scan that QR code or go to that link on your phone. You'll be able to answer our polling and we'll be able to watch those results come in live, which is kind of fun. Last but not least, after this session, we will share the recording with all of our attendees and registrants. So feel free to pass that along to your colleagues if you think they would be interested in it. And we'll also be sharing details of some subsequent educational sessions we'll be holding here over the next couple months. So without further ado, I will kick things over to David Yarkin.
Thanks, Steve. And great to see everybody. I'm really looking forward to today's session. As Steve said, we always enjoy these a lot more when they're interactive. So please take full advantage of the Q&A and the chat. Tell us what you think about an answer we're giving. You feel free to say my answer was awful and Ken's was terrific, which is probably accurate. And use the Q&A tab. And Ken and I will be sure to get to as many of the questions as we can live. And if we can't get to one, you may be lucky recipient of an email answer in your inbox from the great Ken Hess. So let's get started, Ken.
Great.
This is our agenda for today. I figure we'll cover it rather than tell you what we're going to talk about. So this is just a little bit of a preview, a little bit of a taste. But here's a picture of myself and Ken. Looks like maybe from a couple of years ago, Ken.
Maybe.
but it's really great to see everyone. Ken, would you mind just giving everyone a little bit of a flavor about your background and your responsibilities with the Commonwealth?
Ooh, David, you still there?
I am. Can you hear me? No. All right.
Yes.
Ken, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Sorry.
All right. So sorry, it's probably on my end, the beauty of Zoom. But if you could get us started by giving everyone a little bit about your background overall and your role in the Commonwealth, that would be terrific.
Sure. So I'm 15 years with the Commonwealth, David. Before that, spent a lot of time in the private sector in procurement and supply chain management at a lot of warehouses and trucking companies that I dealt with. And in my 15 years with the Commonwealth, we've taken a lot of extraordinary steps to transform our fleet into one of the most effective and efficient vehicle operations, I think, around.
Very good. Well, and I can brag on Ken even more. So Ken and I, way back when, used to work together in the Commonwealth. And even though the org chart may have said something differently, I worked for Ken and learned an incredible amount from him. And I know you all will as well. What's special about Ken and his role for us in this discussion today is Ken oversees both the Commonwealth's fleet as well as the Commonwealth's procurement operations. So in the discussion today, we're going to talk about a lot of things at the intersection between sort of the operating a fleet and procuring the goods and services to support it. So we're really in for a treat. A little bit about me very briefly. David Yarkin, former Chief Procurement Officer of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in an earlier era than Ken. And I also oversaw the fleet like Ken does. And today I run a procurement technology company called Procurated, which I hope you've all heard of. And we'll talk about that in a second at the end. But Procurated is a ratings and review platform. Think of it like Yelp for government. So if you're trying to find a great supplier for auto parts, vehicles, maintenance, vehicle lifts, whatever, you can come to procurated.com and find the highest rated suppliers for whatever your needs are with your fleet. So with that little commercial aside, and thank you, Ken, for letting me give it. Let's get started. And actually, oops, let me, maybe before we do, sorry, don't look at this, guys. All right, before we do, Ken, maybe tell us a little bit about the Commonwealth's fleet. How big is it? What's the
Sure.
composition of it? Who manages it? That may help give people some background.
Sure, great point, David. The Commonwealth fleet is about 15,000 units, which includes, of course, passenger vehicles, heavy duty vehicles, off-road equipment, trailers, you name it. We are responsible for, again, at the intersection with procurement, for fueling both at our own depots and fueling in what I'll call the retail market. Additionally, we have our own in-house repair facilities, so parts and service for vehicles, and maintain contracts with the supplier community to provide those services across the Commonwealth. I guess you don't really realize how big the state is until you're trying to put snow tires on a car 280 miles away in the dead of winter. So that gives you some idea.
And the management of the fleet is somewhat decentralized, right?
Yeah, that is correct. So the DGS, the Department of General Services, has the overall authority for management of the fleet, but of course the operational piece of that is usually delegated to the agencies via automotive liaisons. Each agency has at least one, and many agencies will have one at each location. For example, think of a PennDOT regional office, if you will.
Right. And I think this is probably pretty common in a government fleet, is to have some kind of centralized authority, policy setting, and then the actual operations often get delegated out to the agencies for their specific needs, because they know their requirements and their operational needs better than anyone else does.
Sure.
Okay, so let's jump in, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to ask a poll question. So you all now know a lot about Ken. We want to know about you. Who are we talking to? So if you all would do us the great extreme favor, and as we make this interactive, and go to slido.com, SLIDO.com, and type in this number, 3595202, or use the handy QR code and take a picture. We're really interested in hearing about you and understanding what level of experience you have, because Ken is a very talented guy. He can tailor this conversation for the grizzled old veteran who's been running a fleet since it was horse and buggy, which is actually still how they run fleets in Lancaster. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. I saw the husband in Lancaster there. Or whether folks are, a little on the newer side, 1 to 5 years or so. So we have we'll let this run a little bit longer. We have 65 folks in attendance here, Ken, and 21 people have responded. So wow. I don't know about you, but I'd like to see a little more.
Yeah.
A couple more.
And I will mention, David, that the Commonwealth fleet does not include the State Police Equestrian Unit, and so I don't have to worry about putting exhaust systems on those.
or procuring horseshoes.
Precisely.
All right, we have 23 folks. Let's get to 25, Ken, before we go, because this
okay.
is 26. So thank you. This is very helpful. And what's interesting here is the vast majority of our audience, Ken, tends to skew sort of younger, junior, in terms of their experience with fleet, which is really, I think, exciting.
Sure.
To be bringing lots of new people into the profession. So it looks like, my math isn't so good, but it looks like about 82%, Ken. I don't know if I Excel spreadsheet out, but 82% have been in the business
less than 10 years.
Less than 10 years, and the majority less 1 to 5 years. So I hope that this session, it really does help, because you're a little bit newer. But I'm also sure, Ken, that if we get into a back and forth, you and I will learn a lot from the audience. So, okay, great. So our next question, and this is again to give us a little sense about threshold here we're talking to. How would you describe how rapidly your organization adapts to change? Is it, change is hard in government, right? Is it really slow to adapt? Is it things, we do pretty well, but you know, it does take a little time. Interested in how you would describe it. And again, we have about 14 folks have responded. Let's get to like 25 again, Ken, and then we'll jump on.
Okay. I think one of the things that influences the adaptability to change is the life cycle of the vehicle themselves, right? You have an investment there that you want to get some return on, and so I'm not going to sell or turn in a vehicle after 6 months because some new wow technology came out.
Right.
We still have to be responsible.
True, or budget considerations, right? Yeah, I'd sure love to retrofit all my vehicles with kind of satellite tracking, but
right,
unless the legislature gives me some money for it, or I get more in selling my vehicles at auction, probably not gonna be able to do that. All right, good. So it looks like about half the audience says things take a little bit of time, and I think that's what I would expect. The we are slow to adapt was the slowest of the four options, so it's nice to see it's not really totally stuck in the mud, to use a vehicle metaphor. And appreciate everyone taking a second to answer. Okay, so let's jump in, Ken.
Yep.
There's a lot happening in fleet management these days, and a lot's changed since I left the profession back in the mid 2000s. So let's start and jump in with direct driver engagement. First, for those who may not be familiar with the expression, would you mind just defining it for us and then tell us what you're seeing in Pennsylvania and perhaps beyond in this area?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, automotive liaisons, it had been traditional for us to communicate policy changes with the liaisons out in agency land, let's say. And unfortunately, in today's technology-driven society, trickle down communication is certainly not necessarily the best way to get information, and you don't want it to be just one way. You want it to be two-way communication. So we really are pursuing aggressively direct driver engagement. You can think of that via app development. It starts off slow. Feedback with surveys is kind of a good way to start. One of the more exciting things that I'm looking forward to is gamification. And so, for example, you'll recall back in the days, you used to have posted out on the driver dock of your warehouse or your driver lunchroom that had a chart with X number of days without an accident, or X number of miles driven, right? And the holy grail was for you to be a 1,000,000-mile driver that was accident free. Well, taking that one step further, I think that we can also begin to look at fuel economy by drivers, idle time by drivers, even attentiveness by drivers is certainly trackable and reportable and rewardable. And that's the other part of this is it can't be just top down do, but the opportunity for recognition and reward, I think, will positively modify behavior.
So maybe just give us a little bit of, we'll dive into a little bit. How do you measure driver attentiveness?
So there are. Do you get is your personal vehicle sophisticated enough to say, hey, you need a cup of coffee, or keep your eyes on the road, and that the cameras are tracking the internal vehicle cameras are tracking your eye movement, and if you're blinking or nodding off or things like that. In-car cameras are not just for the state police. Or for truckload, tractor trailer drivers. In fact, I read a study not too long ago where the Marine Corps put cameras in their vehicles and had a significant reduction in accidents as a result. And so, we're not just, and especially in public service, we're not just protecting the driver or vehicular investment, we are protecting the public. right, who could be harmed. And let's face it, we have a lot of folks driving a lot of miles, and so that, driving down those possibilities or probabilities are what it's all about.
Wow, that's cool. I would be curious as we move on to the next question, if people want to throw in the chat, if anyone out there is actually using that technology in their fleet, these cameras that are keeping an eye on the driver to make sure they're paying attention. So if you've had that, if you are using that, let us know in the chat. That's pretty neat. For me, when I'm driving, it's usually my wife or my kids saying, "Dad, wake up." Kidding. Okay, great. Okay, next, alternative fuel vehicles. So this, you can see by the label here in orange, it says emerging trends. And this is interesting because emerging means something that's new. But back when I was with the Commonwealth, when again, we were putting our drivers on top of dinosaurs to get around the territory, we had alternative fuel vehicles, right? We had the we started using hybrid vehicles. We had the what's it called, Ken, that when you use some ethanol?
E85.
Yeah, the E85 vehicles, which we were pumping full of just gas at the time, but they said bio on them. But I know a lot's changed in that time. So tell me, like, when you in the Commonwealth think about alternative fuel vehicles, is that just a cute word for electric vehicles? Or, do you see, government fleets using a wide array of alternative fuels?
Yeah, I think that the more tools that you have in your toolbox, the better able you are to adapt to that particular problem, having the best possible solution. So, one of the things that that we have to consider are the distances that the vehicles are being driven and the frequency with which they are being driven, even as far as where they're being domiciled. If an executive is taking the vehicle home at night, all those things can have an impact on the type of fuel, refueling locations, et cetera. We have, of course, diesel. We have biodiesel. We have E85. We have electrics and hybrids, PHEVs, BEVs. We have CNG vehicles. Being a Marcellus Shale state, that's kind of a prerequisite for us. And I will say that each have their pluses and minuses. I personally, if we're talking about emerging trends, am looking forward to the development of hydrogen-powered vehicles. When you look at BEV, battery electric vehicles, or hybrids or PHEVs that have large batteries as part of the propulsion system, you have a scarce resource in lithium ion or lithium that's being, and other precious metals that are being highly sought after, and of course, driving up the price. You have flammability issues. I won't call out any manufacturers by name, but there have been more than one. You have a disposal issue, at the end of the battery life. Then you have to factor in recharge time and the range of the vehicle. And of course, we've all heard about range anxiety. The thing that excites me about hydrogen is that it's the only exhaust is water vapor. It is more like an internal combustion engine in its build, and so not having to retrain an entire workforce, perhaps, of mechanics, on how to tear apart electric motors and rebuild batteries, a lot of that technology would remain the same. It has a much faster refueling time compared to a battery recharge, and thanks to, again, Marcellus Shale, there's lots of hydrocarbons floating around Pennsylvania that can be stripped off in the hydrogen molecules and to produce fuel. So that's kind of my view going forward. I will say I think there's also an opportunity for cross-pollination here. So solar recharging of vehicles, or even solar powered vehicles, are interesting. In fact, David, you're familiar with federal surplus property. We have a bus up in federal surplus that has solar panels all on its roof, right? Because it has a large surface area, and that can drive the vehicle. Now, it's not going to drive it at 75 miles an hour for a great distance, but think of an airport shuttle, right? That's driving small loops. I think you get the idea that you can marry the technology to the application.
Yeah. Do you think that hydrogen is this like science fiction? Is this something that we'll see in our lifetimes, or is this something that we'll watch movies about and dream about?
I think, well, I guess that you should do a survey on how old the folks
people
are on here, because I might be at one end of the scale as opposed to the others. But what is shocking is how fast technology is accelerating, and given the climate changes that are endemic, I think we are going to have to develop hydrogen power, especially in heavier vehicles, much sooner than might have been thought otherwise.
Yeah, but it's interesting. And I own an electric vehicle personally. My mother-in-law owned an electric vehicle, the kind that was blowing up, the Chevy Bolt.
Yeah.
And I'm a fan, and I like to think I'm being environmentally responsible by buying one. But actually, when I plug it in at night, it's good old-fashioned coal that's powering my electricity, powering my vehicle. So it might give people a false sense of greenness. You use an electric vehicle, and maybe that's one thing that's really attractive about hydrogen, right? Is it's greener. Ken, we have a question in the chat from Greg Gutierrez, who says that in his organization, they've actually moved away from alternative vehicles because of repairs, just because it takes a long time to get parts for them.
Yeah.
The cost sounds like maybe are inflated compared to, the internal combustion engine. Have you seen that in your experience, or is that maybe isolated to another case?
No. I suspect that will get better with broader adoption and as economies of scale grow. But you're right. We had a 2014, I think it was a 2014 Ford Fusion that was an electric vehicle, and the battery finally, said, "I've had enough." The cost to replace the battery was about $14,000, well over the value that would have been left in the vehicle. And so that's one of the things that does bother me a good bit, and that is on the recovery end, right? I don't think any of us ever thought that that we would see single cycle, so to speak, disposable vehicles, but until such time as recycling of battery components and rebuilding batteries is much more widespread than it is, I think we're going to continue to face those challenges as early adopters.
Yeah, it's interesting, and then maybe we'll switch gears, pardon the pun. But I just saw, I think it was the city of Copenhagen, Denmark, just said that after 2030, I want to say, you won't be able to buy or operate a combustion vehicle, in Copenhagen. I know Norway, I think, is banning the sale of it in 2025. So, I think the times they are changing, as a great car driver Bob Dylan once said.
That's great.
Whether that solves the challenges Greg's facing, I don't know, but I do think you're right that certainly scale and widespread adoption all contribute to making parts more available, and the cost of them goes down as technicians are trained in how to repair electric vehicles. So it'll be interesting to watch this for sure. Ken, you talked a little bit about solar already. Anything else you want to add when it comes to solar?
I didn't think that that solar would be available in DC fast charge. So this is the 460 volt version of a electric power line charging, but it is. I saw an interesting solar charging system, and let me just tell you here quickly who it is. It is WIOCOR Energy, WIOCOR, and this is not an advertisement, but they have a solar stack that is like a set of stairs, vertical, with the panels at angles like this, right? And one of the things that I never really considered was the reflective energy that you can get even on the backside of a panel as the sun's rays bounce up off the ground. So not only direct solar voltaic conversion, but even the passive reflective value. And because of that, the systems are made extraordinarily small and compact, and by changing the height or the number of these arrays, you can accumulate enough voltage for DC fast charge, and that that looks to me like something like, to your point, David, you're not going to be buying coal, or you're not going to be buying it all the time. If you were to take the solar and then add to that stationary battery power, where you can capture the energy so that on cloudy days you can continue to charge your vehicle, then I think you're approaching a much better payback than you might have otherwise.
Yeah, fascinating. And we'll talk a little bit more about electric and some of the opportunities that I know you're excited to talk about in a minute or two. Multimodal dispatching. Let's jump in here again, Ken, if you wouldn't mind, again, for audience who, like me, may not know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, define it for us a little bit. I'm just kidding. But if you don't mind defining this for us a little bit, and then tell me about about the application.
Okay. Well, most times when we think of multimodal, and this is when I worked for Kmart, for example, it was goods are arriving import on a container that comes off of a ship. So that's the primary mode, onto a flatbed tractor trailer to be taken to the nearest rail siding to be put on the back of a flatbed train car for shipment across the country. Those are multiple modes, right? Boat, rail, and truck that combine to give you the greatest efficiency and carrying capability. So I sort of twist that a little bit when I think about the Commonwealth's fleets. In addition to passenger vehicles, one of the other things that I have to worry about is package delivery, right? So I have the UPS contract and courier and things like that. And so often what we see is one driver getting in one vehicle, driving 200 miles, and that's it. And then there's 26 agencies under the governor's jurisdiction. Many of the satellite locations, so the unemployment office and the PennDOT office and the I don't know, pick another one, Department of Health office, are in the same county seat, if you will. Right. So what we really are going to be pushing for is vehicle sharing. So instead of one agency leasing or buying a vehicle and it is theirs always, we're going to look at multiple ownership. Think of Falcon jets, for example, right? Partial fractional ownership. And we think that then we can get greater utilization out of the vehicles in that manner. The next step, the next plateau, would be ride sharing, where picture a board like when you're in college, right? You're saying, hey, I need to get from Harrisburg to Williamsport, Pennsylvania next Tuesday. Can anybody give me a lift? Automate that, right, using some modern software. And the intent is to fill every seat in the vehicle. Right now, instead of 4 people driving 4 cars, 200 miles, right? So 800 miles of consumption, it's just or people in one car. And so that's a, quite a benefit for not a lot of cost, and in fact, quite a savings in terms of vehicle and maintenance. And then the next evolution that I'm looking forward to is package delivery. So a lot of our mail and packages, they're going the same destinations as the drivers. And so we have trunks, we have SUVs with a way back. And so again, it would be, hey, David, I know you're going to Pittsburgh tomorrow. Take this package for me and drop it off. And we, presumably will have the smarts to ensure that it's not 72 miles out of your way. And then, instead of paying, sorry, UPS, instead of paying UPS $8 for the box, agency A can pay agency B
Right.
perhaps less than $8, and the taxpayers win and the environment wins, and service is not lessened, or at least not lessened appreciably.
Yeah, that's cool. I know on a college campus, I don't know if I've seen this quite as much in state government, but on a college campus, with all these kids walking around, pedestrian safety on campus is a big deal, and
Sure.
more environmental. I know some colleges are trying to curtail the number of deliveries
Correct.
that get made every day to like the central shipping center, receiving center. Is that part and parcel, pardon the pun again, of what you're talking about, or is that something different?
I think that's a little bit different. Now you're seeking congestion limitations, but regardless, that's an added benefit, right? I think that like Penn State University, for example, my gosh, at class change time, it takes a long time to make any progress with a vehicle. So after hours deliveries are a really a great way to get around those kind of problems. I'm not so sure how well that's going to work unless we're talking about DMVA hospitals or DHS hospitals or state police barracks,
Yeah.
where they're 24/7 operations. But still, a lot of the state is a single shift, and so you have some limited abilities in that regard.
And a lot, I mean, knowing the footprint of the Commonwealth facilities, there's obviously clusters, right?
Correct.
In obviously Harrisburg, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, but most of I would think that the majority of the actual shipments in terms of numbers are going to, a state prison, a state hospital, somewhere that there's not a lot of other traffic going into that one location.
Correct. Yep. And then the other thing is that, so let's think next outside of the Commonwealth. How many deliveries are going to county courthouses?
Yep.
Or to school districts? And so then you begin to expand that network even further, and then go two-way, right? Hey, can you take this package back? So I think there's a lot of potential gain for not a terrible amount of investment.
Now, a lot of these things you're talking about now, which are really interesting, go to the question of like, how do we share resources, right? We don't think about the Commonwealth as 30 different agencies doing their own thing, but do you think there'll ever be a point? I know something that we talked about 20 years ago when I worked with you.
Shared services.
But do you think there'll ever be a point where, or maybe it is, it's already happening, where a PennDOT garage will actually do maintenance on a Department of Revenue vehicle that's 100 miles from the nearest state garage? Do you think that'll ever happen? Is that too difficult?
Happens all the time. I'll give you some examples. So heavy trucks, the DGS fleet does not have a lot of heavy trucks. PennDOT, on the other hand, has a ton of heavy vehicles and diesel mechanics, and they are way better equipped than we are to service those vehicles. So we have a memorandum of understanding, right, an MOU with PennDOT, where they will do service on our vehicles at frankly a much better rate than taking it out into the private sector. Again, it's not that we're trying to take work away from suppliers, but there's better controls, there's greater utilization of parts, service bays, and again, at the end of the day, the taxpayer is winning. But an even more remarkable story is telematics. When we were installing the telematics devices in the vehicles, so it's a device that plugs into the oh my gosh, OBD2 port under your dash. Sorry. We enlisted PennDOT's repair facilities that are district by district, and of the 6,000 some telematics units that were installed, probably about 4,200 were done by PennDOT.
Wow.
So, way more vehicles out around the state than there are in Harrisburg at the Capitol that we could control with our own resources.
Wow. Cool. So you can see, audience who's listening, when I was trying to do this, I was stuck in the mud. I couldn't get it done, and obviously, a skilled operator like Ken has the finesse to accomplish really cool things.
Have a good team.
Oops, sorry about that. All right, let's see if I can get back in here, Ken.
Sure.
We're going to ask you a poll question. We can hear. Hang on, everybody. All right. So Ken's talked about a lot of really interesting technological advances that his team has done. I'm interested in hearing from the crowd again, from you all. Oops. Tell us, and this is not multiple choice. This is just type away. So again, go to slido.com. You can see the number here, 3595202, and tell us what are some of the projects that you did in the last year, the last 12 months, or even give the last 13 months if you had something that happened last June that you want to talk about. And Ken, you should feel free to go on your phone and type out an answer too. I think we all know what you did. So we'll give people a couple of minutes to do this.
Well, David, I would, except I don't know what I do with my phone.
Hey, David, Steve here. I have a question on the last topic. While we wait for some answers here, one question I had, Ken, you were talking about these, setting up an MOU and doing some of that sharing. For a lot of the folks here on the call with us are from, regional authorities or local agencies. Mm-hmm. For them, do you have any advice on, an approach for setting up a partnership like this? Or, I know it would vary certainly by state, but is it sort of just like go knock on doors for your neighbors? Is there any way you would think about approaching that?
Well, I can think of two off the top of my head, and one is yes, neighbors, because geography is important. Partnering between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia is obviously going to have some logistical challenges. So the closer you are, the more able I think you are to get the most out of that type of partnership. I think the other thing is the size of the partnership, and so it'd be probably a whole lot easier for a village to work with a city to work with a county, and so on, instead of the reverse. So again, trying to take advantage of scale and pushing that down. And to my knowledge, MOUs are the type of legal contract or agreement that can be made between agencies or LPPUs, local public procurement units. And indeed, in our procurement code, Chapter 19 does permit local public procurement units to utilize our contracts, for example, and that is the basis for continuing to deliver value to the taxpayer.
Yeah, good. It's a really good question, Steve. And those of you who are interested, we did a really good session last week, webinar around cooperative purchasing, which if you'd like to see it, just email me at david@procurated.com. I'll put that in the chat. I'm happy to send it to you. Good point. All right, so Ken, it looks like there's a lot of a winner here, right? Which is all around electric vehicles and charging stations, and not really a surprise, right? This is hot. This is hot stuff.
Yep.
All right, let's get to our next question, which is similar to the last one, which is, what fleet procurement projects are you working on in the coming year? What are the big things on your docket you want to try and due next year. And it's okay to say buy sedans again, but I think we're interested in like what are the new things maybe you haven't bought before.
While we're waiting for those to come in, David,
Yeah.
I want to be sure to mention that alternate vehicles are another thing that we'll be looking at in the future. So, for example, motorcycles, scooters, electric bikes, they have their place in the transportation hierarchy, and they're low cost, extremely agile, particularly in congested areas, and I think we shied away from them because perhaps safety or weather related concerns.
Yeah.
But again, with smart dispatching, I think that they could be employed in public fleet settings.
I'll tell you, I'm a big electric scooter driver.
Oh, yeah.
Driver. I put on a helmet and I can go from my office in downtown Washington, D.C. to, a mile away in 5-6 minutes, cheaply and, efficiently. It would take me 25 minutes in traffic to get there. So it'd be cool to sort of see a government electric scooter fleet.
I will tell you that's one of the things on my to-do list.
Is there demand? Are you hearing from your customers in the departments they want it?
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah, to keep using a vehicle metaphor again. What did Henry Ford say? If I built people the car they wanted, what was it? I'd be building them a horse or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Which I think is probably true. Okay, great. Thanks everyone for this. And again, a lot of similarities between what people have done in the last year and what's on tap. And you're lucky talking to someone who really understands electric, like Ken, as well as hydrogen. Ken,
Yeah, one of the things that I miss is the Chevrolet Volt with a V. The particular technology in those vehicles, which the internal combustion on board was an electrical generator that recharged or provided electricity to the battery, even after it was dead, so to speak. That I think is I'm not sure why that was canceled, but there was a team over in Austria that tweaked the Chevrolet Volt, and they got 1,200 miles out of it, and it had to do with keeping the generator at a constant RPM.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yep.
No range anxiety there. Can we have a question? Let's try to answer it quickly because I know there's a lot more that you want to talk about. Brad Johnson asks us, what's the holdup on hydrogen vehicles? What's stopping, it from coming out to market and you being able to buy them?
From what I know, it's just like electric, and that's going to be the refueling infrastructure, right? Setting up hydrogen refueling stations all around the country. I just saw an article a couple of weeks ago about Toyota's development, and it appears to me as though the tank or the fuel cell pressure problems have been overcome, and the hardening of the internal parts of the engine have been overcome, and so now it's going to be much like charging infrastructure, and that is, how do we get hydrogen refueling stations out to the public? Very
cool. All right, Ken, we have about 10 minutes left. Okay. So let's take out our crystal balls. And I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about what you see as sort of the immediate short-term risks and challenges in running a fleet. And then we'll spend the last few minutes talking about some of the great opportunities out there.
Yeah, well, of course, supply chain disruptions are just constant. We have had hundreds of vehicles canceled by all manufacturers in the last few years, and some very odd set of circumstances. So, for example, General Motors just canceled 200 Equinox SUVs, but we were able to pick up 60 Bolt EVs. The chip shortage I read a research article, is expected to end at the latest this coming year and could go as long as 2026 until the new capacity comes online. So I think we're going to be milking our fleets much longer than we would have otherwise. Higher fuel costs. I mean, yeah, that's the war and the demand for Marcellus or for natural gas as an alternative fuel in Europe is not helping us at all. And so that's why I like the combination solar technology that would make us less dependent on and to become more self-generating.
By the way,
Yes.
Ken, if you were able to get the state departments to agree to work on each other's fleet vehicles,
Yeah.
I think you would have a good chance of getting Russia and Ukraine to call a truce here. So
Oh, I don't know about that. I think that the other thing that didn't make this list, but one of the things that telematics informs for me is distracted driving, and that we are incurring more costly accidents. The number of accidents are going down, but when we do have them, they are bad. And I don't want, I can't say more often than not, but distracted driving is more a factor than it has been in the past or should be. And again, I think that's why we need to engage directly with drivers, our public operators, and help them to develop best practices behind the wheel. One of the things that was part of our telematics rollout was RFID technology. So every driver that does not have a personally assigned vehicle, so if you're a pool operator, you're assigned a fob. It's an RFID chip that so when you get into the vehicle, you have to fob in, and then we know who's behind that vehicle at all times, and that helps us to modify behavior and to keep track of our vehicles and ensure the motoring public that we can take care of them. In fact, we do a lot of accident dispatching now based on the fobs and on the telematics that we have a link to the Capitol Police. And so if an accident happens after hours, Capitol Police are notified, and ambulance or first responders are dispatched all around the state.
Amazing. All right, let's jump in here to our last topic, Ken, which is opportunities. What do you see looking in at your crystal ball? What are some of the great things ahead of us?
Well, I think this IIJA vehicle charging grant funds is phenomenal. There are two aspects to this. One is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. They call it NEVI. And the other is CFI, which is charging, I can't remember the acronym, sorry. Charging and fueling infrastructure. Sorry, that's what it is. There is about $2.5 billion with a B available through 2026. Grant funds are going to be awards of $1 million minimum. So, I mean, we're talking about big footprint additions to your charging infrastructure. It is an 80-20 split. So the feds are going to, if you are awarded a grant, you'll get 80% from the feds, but the state's got to kick in 20, or local has to kick in 20%. But I think that this is that the Biden administration did a great job of accelerating the adoption and providing the capability. And quite frankly, they put our money where our mouth is. Of course, 5G. I think that again, if we're communicating directly with drivers, that is going to help us, have more stable communications, faster communications. So for example, David, telematics, the device in the vehicle is communicating over the cellular network to a host, if you will, and we're receiving input on the vehicle performance as a result. That same driver has got a phone, right, a cell phone, and we're paying, just in round numbers, let's say $15 a month for the connection to the vehicle and the connection to the cell phone that's in the driver's pocket. What I would like to do is to try to drive those two technologies together, and to pay once for the network. And this extra bandwidth of 5G will permit the vehicle data and the voice data to be carried simultaneously.
Pretty cool. Sounds like science fiction.
Yep. The other thing that I'm looking forward to, in terms of cooperative, we have what we call the fleet turnkey solution that CoStars is going to be working on. The intent here is for us to take all of the contracts that we have for fuel, for parts, for service, for purchasing vehicles, and to make available to our partner counties, cities, boroughs, a turnkey vehicle solution. So, instead of just piggybacking on our contract to get a car and then saying adios, they can go through the entire life cycle all the way through our auction contracts.
Wow.
So we're trying to bring better value.
Amazing. Great. Well, Ken, this is terrific. And I know everyone, I'm sure everyone in the, not only I was going to say, I'm sure everyone appreciates your expertise and what you've shared with us. They can actually tell us now. So
Okay.
another opportunity to just free form here. Love to hear people's thoughts about what you're excited about when it comes to running your fleet this year, next year. What are the topics, the things that you've heard Ken tell us about from his throne of innovation over in Harrisburg? What are the things that you're excited about, folks in the audience? Then we'll give you a minute to answer, and then we'll wrap up. And again, you want to go to slide up, and if you want, you can take your phone out and just take a picture of this QR code, and it'll take you right to the question too. So, Ken, you can also answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I found my phone.
Like our first answer, Ken, is one of our mainstays today. Electric vehicles seems to be quite the buzz.
Indeed.
Like increased tracking, right? Fleet management. Ken, you got someone excited about hydrogen?
That was me.
That was you. No, someone else.
All right.
It's a thing. We'll give people just another minute or two.
Okay, I have a great idea. You know how successful Elon Musk has been with Tesla. I was thinking about starting my own hydrogen vehicle, and we'll call it the Hindenburg. What do you think?
I like the idea. Maybe we should get a branding company to help you a little bit with the
Yeah.
the
Indeed, I'm sure you're up for it.
Ken, any enterprise that you want to be a part of, I do as well.
Oh, great.
Well, give these two folks a chance to finish their answers, and then we'll jump into the to our wrap up here. You have one more person. There's one person typing. Chance to finish. Okay, hydrogen. All right. So, a quick word about Procurated and how you can use it as you're running your fleet, and then we'll share with you Ken's information so you can get in touch with him directly. And thank you in advance, Ken, for taking the time to talk to folks one-on-one. But
thank you.
as I mentioned before, Procurated is a ratings and review platform to help you find the best suppliers, and you're finding them based on the reviews written about them by your peers in other fleet and procurement offices across the country, just for public sector. So if you come to procurement.com, you can register for free. The whole site is free to you in government. As you can see on the top picture there, you can type in the name of a supplier or a category and you'll find results. We also built out for you a specific fleet page, which is procurement.com/fleet. And you'll see this image on the bottom when you go there, and you can click on any of these subcategories that Ken talked about. We don't have hydrogen there, Ken. Hydrogen's coming. Once there's hydrogen vehicles in the mainstream, we'll have hydrogen there. But come there, check it out. And I'd love to get your feedback on it. If it's working for you, tell me. That makes me happy. But as important, if it's not working for you, tell me, because I like making it better. And Ken has been a great partner with Procurated over the last few years. And so he's told me a lot of things we're doing wrong, which requires it's a generosity and love to tell someone that they're making mistakes. So I appreciate it, Ken. So here's how you find us. Ken Hess at pa.gov. And I'm David at procurated.com. So please feel free to ping us. We're happy to answer any questions you have. Ken and I both do what we do because we like to serve and we like to, collaborate with our peers. So please feel free to reach out to us. Ken, any last words of wisdom or advice?
Happy motoring.
All right, well said. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And stay tuned. Anything else, Steve, before we let everybody go? Any last housekeeping?
Nope, that's it. Just everyone keep an eye on your inbox. You will receive a recording of the session and details from forthcoming sessions. And feel free to please share that with your colleagues who might be interested.
Very good. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.